Hello! I'm a little bit sick today. I actually have been to the doctor's office today. I have an upper respiratory infection and the doctor has prescribed me an antibiotic to help get rid of it, but I'm just sounding and feeling a little bit sick. But I've been putting this video off for a few days because I was sick and I didn't want to put it off anymore, so I'm going to be filming my top 10 favorite books of 2016. I really love doing yearly favorites videos. I think this is my 4th year to do a yearly favorites video. Before I get started, I just wanted to mention that for most of these books, I actually have full reviews either in video or written form, and so I will link any reviews that I have in the description so you can go and watch or read and see my full fleshed out thoughts from a lot of these books. So I have 10 books to talk about and not a whole lot of voice to get through this video, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start. I actually have 11 books to talk about because I have 2 books in my number 10 spot, and that's because I like them for very similar reasons and they're kind of on the same level for me, and so I decided to talk about them together. So in my number 10 spot, I have The Winter's Kiss by Marie Rutkowski and The Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson. These are 2 books that are the last books in fantasy trilogies that I absolutely love. The Winter's Kiss is the 3rd and final book in the Winter's Trilogy by Marie Rutkowski, and I really love this trilogy because it follows a girl who is not necessarily the most badass fighter. She isn't the strongest girl that you'll meet, but she is one of the smartest and she's one of the most strategic. And one day she's at the market and she just spontaneously decides to buy a slave. And from there our story starts. Each book feels very different, but they are very continuous with one another, and I would definitely recommend marathoning this trilogy. It is complete now, so it is a perfect trilogy to marathon. The final book in the series was not my favorite in the series, but I really love it and would highly recommend this trilogy. And in a very similar vein, Mary E. Pearson's Remnant Chronicles has a very similar feel to the Winter's Trilogy. This series follows a princess who is set to marry a prince of a neighboring kingdom, and on their wedding day she decides to flee the kingdom because she does not want to marry him, and she runs away to this small coastal town. And then a short time later 2 guys show up, one of them being the prince that she was supposed to marry and another being an assassin that was sent to kill her. And as readers, we don't know which guy is the prince and which one is the assassin, but that makes for a very interesting story. Again, the 3rd and final book might not be my favorite in the trilogy, but it is so good. Each of these books is very different, but also has a very continuous feel to them, and this is another great series that I would recommend marathoning because they're just so good. And I would highly recommend both the Winter's Trilogy by Marie Rutkowski and the Remnant Chronicles by Mary E. Pearson. My number 9 book is Salt of the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. This is a YA historical fiction novel set during World War II. It follows 4 different perspectives as these characters try to get out of Germany right at the tail end of the war. It also covers the sinking of the ship called the Wilhelm Gustloff, which is the ship that the characters are trying to get to, and it is the worst maritime disaster in history. Each of the 4 perspectives are so distinct, but they're interesting in different ways, and I really liked each of the perspectives. And I especially liked the fact that this book has a lot of short chapters. I like short chapters because it makes me feel like I'm reading a lot quicker. I just really love historical fiction, and I love the way that Ruta Sepetys writes historical fiction. This is the 3rd book that she's written. This is a 3rd book of hers that I've read and loved, and I would highly recommend her as an author. My number 8 book is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is a magical story about a circus that comes to life, and it follows these 2 magicians who are kind of stuck in this duel with each other, and the circus is their stage. And it not only follows them, but it follows a whole host of other characters, and I love this book so much. I actually listened to the audiobook for The Night Circus, and I would definitely recommend that. It's such a good audiobook, and it really helps to paint a picture of what the Night Circus is like, and I could definitely feel myself being immersed in the world just by listening to it being described to me. And so if you haven't read this book, or if you have and want to reread it, I definitely suggest checking out the audiobook because that was a really great way for me to read the story, and I think it would be a really great way for you to read the story as well. Number 7 on my list is another YA fantasy book, and that is 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I'm sure you're not surprised to see this on my list because I've talked about this book a lot on my channel over the year. This is a YA fantasy heist novel about a group of kids in this gang, and they are set the impossible task to break into an impenetrable prison. There's 6 characters, and you get to read from each of their perspectives, and you really get a sense of who these characters are. Each character is very vivid and distinct. They have a very unique backstory, and you're given all of that in this book, and I love this. I think that Leigh Bardugo is an excellent writer, and I love the Grisha world that she has crafted in these stories, and I can't wait for her to write more in this world because I just love it so much. And I think that this is some of her best work, honestly. Number 6 on my list is Landline by Rainbow Rowell. I've talked in multiple videos about how much I love Rainbow Rowell's adult literature, and this one was no exception. This is about a woman named Georgie McCool, who is a TV writer, and right before Christmas, she gets her big break to write a pilot for her own TV show, and it means that she's gonna have to spend Christmas away from her family. So her husband, who is kind of fed up with her work life taking precedence over her home life, decides to just take the kids for Christmas and leave her there all alone. And so she ends up spending a couple of days with her mom, and while there, she tries to call her husband on an old landline phone, and she actually ends up calling her husband in the past. And so it just follows Georgie's story about coming to terms with who she wants to be, what kind of mom and wife she wants to be, and kind of trying to figure out exactly where her life is going. And I loved this so much. I actually listened to this one on audio as well, and would definitely recommend the audiobook because it was a really excellent audiobook. I just love Rainbow Rowell's writing so much, and I love this book almost as much as I love Attachments because her adult stories are just so good and they're so well written, and I just really enjoy them. Number 5 on my list is actually a book that I read almost at the very beginning of the year. It was one of the first few books that I read in 2016, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is about a group of kids at a small private college who are taking this class from this really eccentric classics professor, and they kind of get wrapped up in some of his ideas and philosophies, and some crazy stuff happens, and it ends with one of the people in the group getting killed. You find out at the beginning of the book that the character died, and so you just spend the whole book trying to figure out exactly why he died and what he died for. And that's what I love about this book, is because it's not the traditional kind of mystery story. It's not a whodunit, it's a whydunit, and I love it. I think it's such a great story. Donna Tartt is an amazing writer. I can't wait to read more by her because this book gripped me from start to finish, and I really enjoyed it, and I just think it's one of the best books that I've read this year. Obviously, it's on this list, so I think it's one of the best books that I read this year, but it's also one of the best books I've read of all time. So I would definitely recommend checking out The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Number 4 on my list is a book that I read most recently, and that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I love this book because of the writing, the story, and the message that it's trying to convey. I think that it is an excellent book about morality and humanity, and I think that it is a book that everybody should read. It's about these people who were created to donate their organs for other people, and that's their only purpose in life, is to donate the organs and then to die. It's about them understanding that that's their fate and trying to figure out how to live in a world where they're not really gonna live, and I love it so much. I love it so much, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody who likes literary fiction, who likes this kind of stuff. It's so good, and I would definitely suggest it. Number 3 on my list is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hamp. This is a really short, only about 97 pages long book about the author Helene Hamp and her correspondence with a bookseller in London. This is a book of their letters back and forth to each other, and it's so sweet and delightful and charming, and it's happy and it's sad, and it's just so good. If you want to feel better about yourself and reading and just life in general, I would definitely suggest checking out 84 Charing Cross Road because it just makes you happy. Just reading these real people's real friendship over the course of a 20-year period. It's just so good and so happy and just so wonderful, and I can't recommend it enough. It's definitely worthy of being so close to the top on my favorites of the year. My number 2 book for 2016 was so close to being my number 1 book, but I couldn't edge out my number 1 book, so I had to put this one at number 2. And it's a book that's probably on many people's favorites list for 2016 because it's been going crazy on BookTube, and that is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. This is a multi-perspective generational story about these 2 sisters in Ghana and their descendants, and I love this book so much. For being such a short book, it packs such a punch. For being such a short book, you get to know so many different characters and so many different storylines. That's incredible to me, is how good it is for it being her first book, and how amazing the story is, and how much you come to know and love each of the characters, even though you only get about 30 pages worth of a glimpse into their lives. And I just love it so much, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore because, like I said, so many people have already talked about it for their favorites of the year. But if you haven't read it, go read it because you won't regret it, and it is just an amazing book. And finally, my number 1 book for 2016, I'm sure you're not at all surprised to see this as my number 1 book, and that is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I've talked about this book endlessly since I read it, and that was back in May or June, and I have not stopped raving about it. It's been my favorite book since then, and nothing has topped it, and I don't know if anything could have topped it. I don't know if anything would have topped it, but nothing did. So this is definitely my #1 book for 2016. It's about this young boy named Daniel whose father takes him to this kind of library of sorts called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, and he tells Daniel that he can choose one book to take home and care for, and Daniel ends up choosing a book called The Shadow of the Wind by Julian Corax. And after reading this book and kind of becoming obsessed with it, he decides to seek out more of this author's works, and he discovers that someone is getting rid of this author's books. Someone is burning these books. Daniel kind of sets out to figure out exactly what's going on. And so there's this parallel storyline of Daniel and Julian Corax, and it's so good. I did a whole video about why you should read this book because it's amazing, and I obviously will link that in the eye and in the description, and I can't recommend this enough. It's my favorite book of 2016, one of my favorite books of all time now. If you love books, and you love mystery stories, and you love lots of characters, this is the book that you need to read. And it's my favorite of 2016. So those are my top 10, kind of 11 books of 2016. I ended up reading 78 books total, but it was not hard for me to narrow down my top favorites of the year because these books are books that I read, books that stuck with me all year long, books that I definitely want to encourage other people to read because they're so good. I hope that maybe this video might motivate you to pick up one or more or all of these books. I would be so happy to know that my video encouraged you to read one of these books because that's what I'm making it for. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, please let me know down in the comments. Let me know if you have similar opinions to them as me. Do you also consider them to be favorites, or do you have a different opinion than me? I would really love to know. Also, let me know some of the books that you really loved in 2016, or let me know what your favorite book of 2016 was. I would really love to know that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!